Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast, with your industry veteran hosts, Michael Sandoval and Chris Tetzel. This podcast starts now. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Sandoval, and welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers.
And my name is Chris Tetzel.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing? I always introduce you, and you're like, "Well, I'm just here again." So,
yeah,
great.
I'm
I
Michael.
I gave you a magic pause.
I was like, "Oh wait, that's my sign. I should say something."
Well, thank you guys. Thank you for thank you, listeners, once again for joining us. We have a very special guest today. We have an author and community expert who's spoken in many places, including the CMX community. Her name is Carrie Melissa Jones. Say hello, Carrie. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I am wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. You know, I didn't ask you at this when we did the pre-show. Where are you located by chance?
I'm currently in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee. Oh my goodness. Well, that must mean the spring is just glorious right now.
It was for a day.
Oh. Is it true that you have mosquitoes the size of small beetle bugs? You know, like Volkswagen beetles.
I don't know. This will be my first full summer here, so I'm
okay.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, they suck you dry, but that's what I hear about the at least the lake region up north in that area. Well, it's wonderful to have you on. Thank you so very much for joining us. I know you have a busy schedule, but we were just excited to get a chance to interview you, especially with an upcoming book that really piqued my interest. We were talking about the pre-show how, you know, both of us, we've greenfielded B2B communities, and one of the things we have a big passion for is around brand communities. What got you into writing a book on brand communities?
I feel like with all things community building, it happened by accident. And so I've been.
That's funny you say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been building communities and been part of online communities specifically since I was a teenager in Silicon Valley. And I got my first computer that was a hand-me-down from my parents. And so I've been addicted to online communities ever since then. But I didn't realize that community management and community building was a real job that I could have. There wasn't a major college, community building major. So I kind of fell into this after school and realized that my passion really was building community all along. So that's how I got started in my career building community. And then this particular book, I've been following Charles Vogel's work for quite a while. He's the co-author of this book. I did not write this alone. I don't want to imagine what I would have been like writing this particular book alone. So I met Charles several years ago, and we'd been following each other's work, and he read a piece that I wrote after working on a project with the American Medical Association. And I had talked about the differences between advocacy and community building and how they're often conflated, talked about as though they're the same thing. And sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not. And he said, you need to write a book about this. And I written one blog post, it's a far cry from a book. And luckily,
Carrie, I think that's sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
I think we had a podcast talking about customer advocacy, community building, and lots of super user programs and all these things that it's like there's a difference, and no one really has given a big kind of difference in those things, and so I think that's really great. Hopefully your book kind of covers some of that, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we talk about the differences between community building and social media management, community building and advocacy, like brand advocacy and even political advocacy, and community versus a one-time event is another of the distinctions that we make.
Well, not to give away the long of the thesis, but so tell me, how do people conflate community advocacy and brand and community building, as you say?
So I wouldn't say that's the entire thesis of the book, but what people often use the word community without actually stopping and considering what they mean when they say it. that word in our culture conjures up this unipositive, warm, like warm blanket feeling when we say we're in a community together. But what does it really
It's like watching cows in the pasture, thinking that's where milk comes from.
community? Yay! Uh,
Yay!
but and that's a very abstract concept, and so
Yeah, agreed.
yeah, I mean, if you're going to talk about community in this abstract way, everything that human beings do is about community. So we needed to narrow that a little bit and talk about what does it mean to build a community consciously? What are the structures that must be in place? And what does that word mean when we are talking about community as a verb versus talking about it as more of a noun?
Well, let me dig on that one a bit because one of my kind of, I wouldn't say pet peeve, that's a terrible term. One of the things I struggle with a lot is that term, community.
Mm,
I think Chris and I have had a lot of experience about even changing the noun somehow with like we even use online community, customer community, like it needs some sort of modifier, or
yeah.
we'll just completely change it to like online support or forums or the like. I mean, how do you? This is a challenge I have, especially from community managers, uh, struggling with that term. And I let me just add one more point, and I would like to get your opinion. Is I think it also depends on the industry, right? So if you have kind of younger, you know, internet focused uh, websites, community makes sense. But if you're in a B2B, maybe let's just say industrial or something along the lines, community doesn't make sense. So, what's your experience if you've seen about using that term, as you mentioned, as a verb versus a noun?
Yeah, so I mean, I think every industry can build community that's valuable to their industry. It just depends in what context we're talking about. But in terms of the actual definition of the word community, I think we overcomplicate it. And the reason for that is that I think in a lot of businesses, especially, people want to fit what makes sense for business into this warm, cozy blanket of a term, community. So they want to create this sense of like win win, and oftentimes they're, can I swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
And I don't think that they think that they're full of shit. It's just that the values that they
I
say
love it.
they
You're the first person that said bullshit. Anyways, go ahead.
Yay, accomplishment. um, I think that they will say the values that really matter to them, and those are the ones that help them, sleep at night. But when it really comes down to the decisions that get made, they make decisions with different values. And so, really, a community is not that complicated. There's a 3-part definition that Charles and I use, and it's just a group of people who share a mutual concern for one another's welfare. So that means they actually have to care about one another and not just see each other as screen names or numbers in a system. And they also have to share a connected identity founded in at least one value or purpose. And finally, they have to participate in multiple shared experiences. And in the case of a brand community, and this is in my work, the only thing differentiating a brand community from a organically created community is that these shared experiences that I'm talking about are
Hmm.
stewarded by the brand. So that's
Yes,
the only
agreed.
difference. So they're providing the resources, maybe the people, the capacity, the training. But that's really the only difference between a brand community and a community community.
Oh, that's great. So I think one of the things you also speak about in the book is this idea of authenticity, right? So it almost kind of dovetails what we just mentioned, which is at a brand level or talking about brand level type communities, part of that shepherding, if you will, uh, is to help create an authentic space. Help me if I'm in the right kind of realm from your
Yeah,
thoughts here,
yeah.
so that it is a natural, evergreen, growing, self uh, I guess self growing environment. What one is is that an agreeable thing, and two, are there steps you go or how you work with companies to create this authenticity element?
hmm Yeah. So, I mean, I think what you're describing is really how do we create a culture in which people actually authentically care for one another? Um, and correct me if I'm wrong in understanding how you understood what I was talking about. Um, so when I think about authenticity, I mean, that's another word we throw around a lot right now. And really what it comes down to is, do people think that you are who you say you are? That's what it means to be authentic, is people believing that, and you acting in accordance with who you say you are. So in order to craft a community that is full of authentic connection, you yourself as the leader of that community, or the person bringing on leaders, have to also be authentic.
Mm.
And it starts with leadership. It always does. Always.
So I'm assuming you've, as part of some of your consulting process, have worked with companies along that path. Have you, because I agree with you, it starts with leadership. In fact, in some of the things that I've discussed or talked about, and I'm sure it's all the same with everybody, it's this idea that you have to have a top down, bottoms up leadership structure that allows community to be successful. And I'm sure you have very much similar thoughts around that around that piece as well. In your experience with some of these companies, do you have to kind of help them through, or are they in a path already that they know they have to have a community and you're just kind of helping them through that process?
Oh gosh, no, I wish it was that easy. I really do. I have ended client engagements at the end of workshops in tears before. But
Wow. No, this is the important part, right? 'Cause, some of our listeners, they have the same effect. They've been brought in to do some things and they
oh
run into
my,
these issues.
anyone that tells you that this is just, if a team says, "Oh, we want a community," and you can just hire a community manager and bring them in and everything will be figured out, has never actually done this in practice. So I'm trying to think of actual examples from my client work that I can share with you that aren't under NDA. Um, I can share examples of good leadership and bad leadership if that's helpful.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I'm thinking now, I can't share the name of this company, but it is
Of
a
course not. Please don't.
Fortune 50
Yeah.
company in the consumer space. And I can guarantee anyone listening to this podcast would know the company. And I went in and did some workshops with their team. And they had said, prior to me coming in, we definitely want a community. We know community matters. Let's find a way to connect our customers together. And so
Sounds
I thought,
brilliant.
yes, I
Yes.
thought, I don't know if you know what you're asking for, but let's do this.
Did they
You're
add
asking,
the word authentic into that sentence at all?
yes, they did.
Peer-to-peer networking,
Peer-to-peer, yes,
etc. Yeah.
governance. Yeah.
Oh, yes, all the good stuff.
So I went in there, and actually the people who had initially signed on to do the work were fully bought into. They had a group of people in mind who they knew they wanted to work with. They had already met with some of them and already been talking with them, so they had fertile ground to build a community on. But they had just hired 2 weeks prior a new VP of marketing, and that VP of marketing was the new boss of all of these people who, prior to that point, had managed themselves and had managed with sort of I don't want to say holocratic structure, but a structure in which they were pretty autonomous.
Right.
And all of a sudden, this marketing leader came in, and she also cared about community. But as we got into about hour 3 of the workshop, we stopped talking about the value of community, and she just started asking me, "Okay, how are we going to show that this matters? How are we going to show this is successful?" And there was a point at which she actually turned to me and said, "This has been a really helpful session, and I'm glad you flew out. I flew across the country for this session. I'm glad you flew out here, and I can tell that you know what you're talking about." And then she was like, "So thank you," and then just left.
Sweet.
And can you guess whether they have a community right now or not?
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the things about being a consultant is you do not always succeed in your efforts. And um, it can be really disheartening. I always try, obviously. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
but some people, there's a longer journey for them to take to go through this change in mindset of, how business really needs to shift. Not everyone's ready for it, frankly. So yeah,
I,
that's
if that,
example.
yeah, no, if that could be a quote, not everybody's ready for it, and it's interesting because again, some of the fielded questions we get is in that situation. If it's almost the same way, but now think of yourself not necessarily as the consultant, but the person that was hired. Now, hopefully, if you go through your interview process, you can vet this out. But some folks come in and realize that they actually don't have the support at the highest levels, and they're struggling just trying to get kickstarted or even funding for this brilliant, customer facing, authentic, all wonderful community that's going to solve the world's ills. And they can't get started for it. I mean, they can't even get funded for
Yeah,
it.
and
And it's a
frankly,
challenge. It's a huge challenge.
yeah, I was going to say that frankly, if your first question or even your first 10 in the first 10 questions you ask is, how are we going to get something out of this?
Yep.
I urge you to step back and not question whether or not this will ever be right for you, but you absolutely need a mindset shift around that. With community, that's a long-term value. And people often look at communities that have been around for 10 years and say, wow, look at all the incredible things that come out of like the WordPress community or the Harley Davidson community. But guess what? That's been around for 30 years.
Yeah.
I hear that stuff all the time, Carrie.
Yeah.
It's like, well, look at our competitor site. They've been doing they have all this really good stuff. I was like, we've been around for 6 months.
Yeah.
They've been around for 10 years. I was like, there's a big difference. Think of the content that's being produced and all these customers that are on there and engaged. They've had 10 years of, but yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I speaking on the leadership side, especially when I am working to sell community or to not sell, that's the wrong term, but encourage a company, if it's the right thing to do, to invest in community. I tell them that this is an investment. This is not a, one and done or a marketing campaign or an Instagram campaign where you just throw it out and all of a sudden you're going to get all these hits. That's magic. This is about nurturing, investing, pumping out, and getting content and creating that culture that you just mentioned. And over time, it'll get to a point where it actually pays back to you. But it's like feeding water to a plant, right? It just takes time for it to kind of seed back to you.
Yeah, but also, I mean, look at our current moment right now, and you're talking about influencer strategy. Guess what kinds of strategies are not getting a lot of money right now is influencer strategies. And guess which companies are really leaning on what kinds of strategies people are really leaning on right now are community strategies, not
That's
the
fascinating.
influencer strategies. In a crisis like we're currently in, community is what's going to get us through this and get organizations through this, not these short-term transactional programs.
I think it's a really good observation. More than just observation. I think it's something you've probably seen out there in the field. I agree. I even tell folks in this pandemic crisis mode, especially I wouldn't say customers, I'm sorry, clients or businesses or companies that are on the edge of going through a digital transition or want to do something. This is the moment, right? To experiment, to get out there and try to figure it out. This is what people need. They need direct information and direct access to you where they can't physically see you or meet you. Community plays into that sphere extremely, extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So kind of continue on. Actually, part of me wants to kind of start or kind of pull back a little bit and think about how you got started in community. I know you said you were kind of starting as you were a teenager or a kid, but one of the things you said that piqued my interest was the same thing that I hear every community manager say. I kind of fell into this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what either they created it or they happened to be in it. And I'm the same way too. I fell into it and created the organization at, one of the companies I was in such that was there, but it is definitely not a community manager school. How was your story?
So professionally, I'll talk about that.
Yeah, good idea.
I've been doing it. I mean, if I really trace it back, I'm sure this is true for you too as well. Is like if you really look back at your history, you've been doing this since you were like a little kid, probably starting clubs and like creating agendas for meetings and things like that. But professionally, I had actually started my career in publishing, and I thought I wanted to be an editor. And I had an English degree, and so I thought, okay, this is a really solid path, and it's been well. A lot of people have traveled it before me, so there's an easy pathway for this. And then I ended up realizing that publishing was going through a lot of changes that I wasn't certain I wanted to be there for. And then one of my colleagues at the publishing company went into startups, and he invited me to join him at the startup, and that was Chegg,
Oh,
back in 2012, I want to say. And I didn't realize that the role I was being hired into, which the job description was build a network, was the word they were using, network, not community, of experts around the world in various academic subjects so that we can help
hmm.
students 24 hours a day. So I would see that now and immediately go, that's a community problem. But at the time, I was like, that's a recruiting problem or that's a sales problem. So I went there and I just loved it. I was talking to academics all day, and organizing them and bringing them together for the first time. Doing, at the time, Google Hangouts was a very cutting edge way of
Oh,
bringing
yes, yes.
members together. Yes. And then I discovered, I still didn't know community manager was a job title, but I was on Meetup one night in San Francisco thinking I'd really like to make some new friends. I had just moved into the city, and I discovered there was something called a community manager meetup. And the first one I chickened out and I didn't go to. I was too nervous. and, then, and then the second one, I actually looked up. I joined Twitter because I saw that people were on Twitter, and realized, okay, if I tweet at people and say I'm going to be there, then I have made myself accountable to being there. So anyway, I show up at this meetup and I meet people who I met Evan Hamilton that night, who you might know. He's the head of community at Reddit now. And I met so many people who set me on this path. Tim McDonald being another one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, from there, I remember going home after that and talking to my roommates and saying, this is the job I want to do for the rest of my life. I
Oh,
decided
wow, that's
in there
profound.
that night
For
because,
the rest of your life. That's great.
well, so far I've been right. Who knows what might happen over the long
Yeah.
term. But yeah, I just have felt this like deep affinity for this work this whole time. It's really important work that I love doing.
You're preaching to the choir. We
Mhm.
completely agree with you. We fundamentally believe that it is not only just value, not to be so business centric about it. There's value to the company, but there's value to the company, to the customers that you have,
Mhm.
and that kind of brings loyalty. That all goes back, and that authenticity is really, which is going to pay back to you tenfold. So no, I agree, and we have quite a passion of being able to help customers individually. And you get a kick out of it, right? Like you see it in the end of the day, like, man, I just helped somebody today. This is really awesome.
Yeah.
It's great to see that.
Yeah.
Uh, I know we're getting close to the end. Chris, you know how I always love to hog time.
Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty good at that, but that's okay. It may helps make this go really well. Your book comes out on, is it June 6th now? Because it was May and they pushed it back. Is that right?
Yeah, June 9th, because
June
of
9th. Okay.
all the things going on in the world, things I can't control. June 9th is the date. Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, this has been great. You've been very open and very honest and just, you could tell you're very passionate. And I feel like if there's one big thing about community managers, that you have to be passionate about what you do.
Hmm.
And, that's something I do appreciate about folks like yourself, Michael, myself, and others, and it's just, we're very passionate people, so,
Yeah.
um, but no, I mean, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. And, if Michael, you want to close it out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, Carrie, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us in this episode
Thank
of Peers
you.
Over Beers. I hope we have you again sometime, and we wish you the best of success on your book that's coming out.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll say thank you very much for listening to another podcast of Peers Over Beers. My name is Michael Sandoval.
And I'm Chris Detzel.
All right, thank you guys. Have a good evening.